This happened last year in Virginia, and is also the reason I never backpack alone anymore. I was taking summer courses at the time, and we ended up with a 3-day weekend in June, so I thought it was a great time to go explore some of Virginian wilderness. I did a quick Google search and found a state park with a trail. The trail looked nice, so I let my roommate and family know that I was going to be going on the trip. When I got close to the park area, I saw a little outdoor shop where people hiking the Appalachian Trail stop. I went in to grab a map of the area just in case I got lost. As I was talking to the owner, he mentioned a trail that's not well known, but it has a pretty cool waterfall and swimming hole. This piqued my interest, so I had him show me on the map. It took me to the outside of the state park, but he said it was a great place to go. I paid for the map and thanked the owner. I texted my roommate and parents about the new trail, and I parked my car and set off on my new adventure. I should note that the waterfall was going to be a side trip for my journey. I was planning 3 days, 2 nights. I started on part of the Appalachian Trail, and it was pretty packed with people. Some of them were really fun to talk to. As expected, the further I got from the main trail, the less people I saw. Around early afternoon, 3 miles from my destination, I noticed it was unnaturally silent. No birds, no bugs, not even wind, and I had a feeling that I was being watched. I shook it off as me overanalyzing the situation. I got to the waterfall, and it wasn't too spectacular, but it was cool to look at. Plus, it had a good size area to swim in, so naturally, I stripped down to my skivvies and took a dip. It was pretty refreshing. As I was getting my clothes back on, I started whistling to myself. It was Chill Bill because it was stuck in my head. That's when I heard something whistle the same tune back. I thought it was a bird copying me, so I went back and forth with it, and it'll repeat whatever I whistled. I thought it was pretty neat. As I was setting up camp, I couldn't shake this feeling that I was being watched again. Like I'd get goosebumps and my hairs would stand up. As night fell, I built a small fire and lit my jet boil to make dinner. As I did this, I became hyper aware that again there was no sound, just deafening silence. Some part of my brain was telling me that I'm not safe and to leave. I ignored it and crawled into my tent with my flashlight and a book. I went to sleep without incident. When I woke up the next morning, my sight was trashed. My camp stool was nowhere to be found. My bear bag with my food was cut down and the contents were thrown across the site. My first thought was a crafty animal chewed through the rope and got at the bag, but I looked at the rope and it was cut with something very sharp. Plus, none of the food was even touched. I also noticed bear footprints all around my campsite. Keep in mind, I'm at least 6 to 8 miles from the road. As I was looking at the mess, I heard a branch snap off in the distance. I turned to look in that direction. I saw nothing, but I heard the whistling again. My whistle from yesterday. But it was different. It sounded more sinister. It made my hair stand on end, and this is when I listened to my instincts to get the hell out. It sounded like it was a little off in the distance, so I packed up my camp as fast as I could. The whistling got closer as I finished stuffing the tent into my bag. I didn't bother with putting anything away properly. The whistling was incessant and sounded like it was coming from all directions. I got fed up with the whistling and stood and yelled, "Shut up, and what the fuck do you want?" It stopped whistling, and it was quiet for a moment, then it repeated what I said in my voice. It sounded just like me, but distorted, like it came from an old TV. After I heard this, I immediately threw my pack on and ran the direction I came. I heard him moving just behind me, fast, switching between my whistle and my voice. It felt like it was toying with me, not coming too close, but not being too far. Eventually, it sounded like it got further and further away from me. Then it stopped. When it stopped, I stopped and turned around. I wished I didn't because I heard the most bone-chilling screech ever coming from right next to me. That's when I started running again. I did not dare to look back. I only ran. Less than a half mile I ran into a couple that was also backpacking. They saw the look of terror in my face and asked if that was me that screamed. They also asked if I was okay. I told them about what happened, and they decided to not go down where I just came from. We moved to a more populated trail as quickly as we could. As soon as I got back in my car, I drove to one of the park's ranger stations and reported what happened. Since the site was off park grounds, they told me that it wasn't in their jurisdiction, but they'll send a ranger to investigate. The ranger station's parking lot run right up to the woods, and when I was getting into my Jeep, I heard the Chill Bill tune coming from the woods just in front of me. I never drove so fast in my life. When I told my roommate at home everything that happened in the woods, the first thing he said was, "Bro, I'm never going camping with you." This story took place when I was at summer camp, located in the woods. For privacy reasons, I won't mention the name of the camp or the location. Every year, my friends and I would join this summer camp in the woods. During our time at the camp, we were always having fun in the river, playing games in the woods, and telling scary campfire stories. But all of this would change this year. The date was July 12th, 2019, first day of camp. I was just about ready to finish my bag, as my mom called my name. It was time for the 1-hour car ride to camp. When I was finished, I got in the car and drove down towards the woods. Upon arrival, I unloaded my bag and met up with my friends. My friends and I were all given the same cabin, so we already knew this was going to be a great year at camp. After unloading all of my stuff, I walked out with my friends and went to the Great Hall to eat. This is the area where most kids hang out. This is because there's a cafeteria with food. As I was hanging out with my friends at the table, I looked around and I caught a glimpse of a girl. She looked to be around my age with red hair. That's when my friend punched me in the shoulder. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Nothing." Later that day, as the sun began to set, the camp counselors called everyone to the Great Hall to start the activity. It was gonna be capture the flag between two teams, green and purple. Before joining the camp, we were all assigned a color, and I was assigned the color green, along with my friends. It's crazy how the girl that I saw earlier was on the same team. This time, I went up to her and asked her name. She replied saying Sadie. Then she smiled and asked for my name. I told her my name and was about to ask her to hang out sometime. The bell fired off. The game has begun. My friends and I decided that it would be best if we took the route through the woods, since we would have the most cover from the other team. Sadie went with her friend to the barn. As we were walking through the woods, we heard a branch snap. I looked off into the distance, and I saw the head of a man staring at us from behind one of the bushes. I jumped back, startled, because the head looked like a corpse. Then, as I looked down, I saw a shirt with the color purple on it. Instantly, I knew it was the person from the other team, so I yelled at my friends to run, in order to not get caught. Obviously, I led my friends, and started running, but 30 seconds later I tripped over something in the middle of the path. My friends helped me up, and we were all confused at what could be in the bag, when the smell hit us. It smelled rotten and old. I gagged as my friends slowly opened the bag to see what was inside. It was the body of an animal. That pushed everything over the edge. I started to put two and two together, and realized that the person wearing the purple shirt was probably some random person, and he did not belong to the camp. I told my friends this, and together we went back to the Great Hall to let everyone else know about the strange man. This was when I realized that Sadie was still at the barn, as there was no way for her to know about the strange man. I rushed out the door and ran as fast as I could towards the barn. Once I reached the barn, I tried the door, but it was locked. "Who is it?" a voice from the other side answered. I recognized the voice to be Sadie's, so I responded, "It's me, Eddie." She immediately opened the door in a panic, letting me inside. What she told me next was horrifying. Sadie said that she was here with her friend at the barn when a random man from the other team walked in and threatened them. That's when her friend ran out the barn, and the man started chasing her. As Sadie was thanking me one more time for coming to save her, I looked at the barn window and saw the same strange man. Next thing I knew, I gestured towards Sadie to run out the barn while I distract, and that's what we did. Luckily, she ran out the barn fast, and I didn't have to do much distracting, because after 30 seconds, I ran towards the Great Hall as well. From there, the cops arrived and arrested a strange man walking around camp. I then met up with my friends, while Sadie met up with her friend. I decided to go up to Sadie and ask for her number, in which she gave it to me. We make a good team. I looked up at her and said, yes we do. To this day, I still don't know the reason why the strange man was lurking around camp. If I remember this correctly, it was the morning of July 29th. The sun had just risen on a nice 63-degree day. My gear was all packed up and ready for the start of my hiking trip. The trail I was going to take was the Appalachian Trail. Of course, I was not going to complete the whole 6-month trip. My plan was to hike on a trail for 3 days and then return. Therefore, I would get the experience of hiking, but it would not ruin from my time at work. Anyways, upon leaving the house, I grabbed all of my belongings and I made my way to my car. Once there, I drove to the woods at the start of the trail and began my hike. At the beginning, I was passing lots of people left and right. This was enjoyable. I would always try and start conversations with as many people, but essentially, the further I got, the less people I saw. I got to a point where I was the only person on the trail for miles. Luckily, I had my headphones with me, and I was listening to some music that I downloaded off the internet to keep me busy. By nightfall, I had developed a plan. I was going to place my campsite slightly into the woods off the trail, so that is what I did. As soon as the sun started to go down, I walked off the trail and started working on my tent. I quickly realized that I began working on the tent too late, as it was already dark. I began to panic when I realized that part of my tent was missing. There was no way for me to set up the tent without this one piece. To make matters worse, I started to hear walking sounds coming from the woods. I turned on my flashlight and pointed it out in the direction of the sound. Hello? Anyone there? I waited a couple seconds, waiting for a response. The sound of walking through the leaves broke the silence. This time, it sounded closer to me. "Don't come any closer, I have a gun," I screamed. As I looked around with my flashlight, I still could not see anything. At this point, I decided my best option was to make a fire, in hopes that the animal or person would get scared and leave. Luckily, I had matches with me, so the fire was easy to start. Once the fire was finished, the sound seemed to stop, so I got back to working on the tent. Somehow, I found a stick on the floor that was able to support the weight of the tent. This allowed me to set the tent up. Once inside, my panic started to ease since I had a fire made and I felt a lot safer in the tent. But that all went away once I shined my flashlight outside to check one more time. What I saw scared the shit out of me. As I was shining my flashlight, I could see a person with a mask on staring at me from the bushes. I didn't even waste a second. I grabbed my backpack and started running out of the tent into the darkness of the woods. I had no idea where I was going, if I was on the right path, or if the man was chasing me, but frankly, I did not care. All I wanted was to escape from that guy. Somehow, as I was running, I ended up back on the Appalachian Trail, and I used that trail to hide behind a large rock formation. The rest of the night was a painful and restless night of hiding and paranoia. As soon as I saw the sunrise, I decided to turn back around and go home, ending my trip early. To this day, I am forever grateful that I found a trail that night, and I did not get lost, or worse, killed. This story took place in the year 2019. My best friend and I were exploring the woods located near my house. We always wanted to go far into the woods and look around, but we were always scared because of the stories that surround the woods. It is said that the woods are connected to a set of mountains in the distance. Also, there were people who talked about the trails that lead up to the mountains. So one day, my friend and I decided that we were just gonna go and explore. We packed all of our supplies, which was just a flashlight, a few granola bars, and water. The cases of missing people in the woods and mountains are talked about all throughout our town. My friend and I never really believed them, as we always thought it was a cover-up for people to not go into the woods. Anyways, my friend and I decided to leave for the woods at around 6 p.m. We walked into the woods oblivious to the fact that the sun was setting and that it might get dangerous. At some point during our walk into the woods, I heard a whistle coming from somewhere in the woods. Now, normally this does not freak me out or anything, but to be honest, it was pretty dark out, and so the situation was just creepy. Anyways, I asked my friend if he heard the whistle, but his response scared me. No, I didn't hear anything. Are you sure you heard a whistle? This caught me off guard, as I knew for sure I just heard a whistle coming from the woods. At this point, I instantly told him that we need to leave the woods, and surprisingly, he agreed. The only problem is that as we turned around, we realized that we were lost in the woods at night. We had no idea which direction we had to take in order to get back home. In that exact moment, I heard a loud sound coming from the woods. It sounded like a firework, or maybe like a rock hitting against each other. None of us knew what to do, so I decided to just choose a direction away from the sound and start walking, so that we can try to get away from that sound. As my friend and I were both walking in the dark forest away from the sound, the whistling started again. This time, it sounded like it was coming from every single direction around us. I started to slightly panic, as I knew this was a bad situation to be in. I asked my friend what we should do. He responded with, "Let's just keep walking a little more and see if we can get away from the sound." Now, keep in mind, we did not see anyone out here in these woods. After a bit of walking, the sound did not go away. It only got louder. So I came up with the great idea to stay up the whole night and walk out of the woods in the morning. For the rest of the night, my friend and I were in a small tent, surrounded by whistling sounds and fireworks sounds coming from all around us. But we made sure to both stay calm. And in the morning, we went back to the trail and walked home. To this day, I still don't know what was making those sounds in those woods. This encounter happened many years ago, when I was very young. It was around the year 2001 or 2002, and I was 11 to 12 at the time. My uncle was interested in purchasing some land near Red Oak, Oklahoma. I do not know exactly where, but it was several acres in a very remote area. My mother and I decided to accompany my father one Saturday to scope out the property. From our home, it was a little more than a 3-hour drive, but we all love riding in the car, so while it was not going to be the most eventful road trip, we went just to get out of the house. Upon arrival, I remember being very underwhelmed by the place. No houses anywhere near, and hardly even any signs of life at all, apart from a few birds. And the wooded area wasn't exactly what I call picturesque. Still, we parked our car off the road to go explore the woods a little. My uncle was talking about buying the land for hunting, not really my cup of tea. As we walked through the woods, it was a very nice day, but still, something felt off. Everyone in our group remarked about the eerie feeling, but my dad and uncle seemed to laugh it off. My mom had goosebumps and kept looking over her shoulders, which made me on edge too. She was very insistent that it was weird and she wanted to leave, saying it felt like she was being watched. After a bit of hiking, I noticed that there was a small red building. I've seen bigger storage sheds in the suburbs, but it looked well built. My uncle said there was nothing about it on the listing, so we went to peek inside. The door was open, and inside there were open cans of food, a ratty blanket on the floor, and it stunk unlike anything I'd ever smelled before. Following this discovery, we all agreed it would be best to get back to the car. If there was some crazy hermit living in the woods, we didn't want to be around to find him. Only issue, we had walked pretty far into the woods, and now we weren't exactly sure which direction was correct. The eerie feeling was really amped up, and we were all on edge. We ended up trekking another mile before we finally found a road, but we were further down from where we had parked the car, but at least we could just follow the road now. Walking along the road, we came across a truly unsettling sight. Right in the middle of the asphalt was a dark gray cat, on fire. I have no idea why a cat was out in the middle of nowhere, or how it came to be killed and set alive. Obviously this had just happened, but there was no one in sight, Naturally, we ran the rest of the way to the car. There was a huge scratch in the paint, all down the side of it, from hood to truck. Thankfully, that was the only damage, and my dad was able to start it without any trouble. We drove off as fast as we possibly could. My heart is sped up just recounting this moment, definitely one of the scariest of my life. Needless to say, my uncle did not buy the land, and I'll always remember this terrifying encounter. But like anything, over time I sort of pushed it to the back of my mind, and it just became one of those odd moments you occasionally retell at family get-togethers years later, so much that it's almost just a funny story. The reason I'm sharing this is because I was reminded of it last night while binge watching some episodes of BuzzFeed Unsolved on YouTube, when they shared the story of a family that disappeared in the same area, while also looking at some land for sale. The disappearance of the Jameson family is the name of the mystery in the video, if you're interested. The family died in the same area we were searching, roughly 7 years after we made our trip there. There are many theories about their deaths, including the allegations of some sort of cult in the area, complete with something about dead cats. Coincidence? Probably, but the whole story gave me chills. So my family narrowly avoided being killed by some witches, or a cult, or whatever, or we just stumbled upon a hermit who didn't want us in his woods. I went to summer camp in a rural part of New Jersey, back in the mid-1990s. The camp was situated on a long, narrow, man-made lake. One end of the lake was reserved for swimming, which we do as a group activity, every other day or so. I was at the camp with my two best friends. The swimming area had one long dock, stretching straight out into the water, and two square floating docks further out. One of the two floating docks was a bit far away, but the dock that was the farthest away was called the faraway dock. Although I had spent a few summers at the camp, I had never seen anyone use that faraway dock. One day, my friend got the bright idea that we were going to swim out to the faraway dock. He did not want to do so alone, so he convinced me and my other friend to go with him. Each year, the counselors at the camp would tell all the campers to never swim out to the faraway dock. But since my friends and I were all 11 at the time, we decided to go. I would consider this to be a moderate challenge for a casual swimmer. The next day around lunchtime, my friends and I snuck out the cafeteria. We walked to an area of the woods with a lot of bushes and prepared for the swim. Once ready, we started our swim. When we reached the dock, I noticed a strange looking spider on the ladder that you had to use to climb up. It was quite large in terms of overall footprint, probably about 2 inches 5 centimeters from end to end, with long skinny legs. Spiders, of course, are normal critters to encounter in nature, but this one stood out to me because of its unusual appearance. After the long swim, we took a few minutes to lie on the dock and rest in the sun. It was relaxing, and we were all having a good time. At some point, I heard a weird scratching sound coming from the dock we were laying on. I asked my friends if they heard the same sound, but they brushed it off as water hitting the dock. We started messing around and decided to play one of our regular games, where we would all shuffle towards the corner of the dock, causing it to sink. We would play this game at every single dock whenever we got the chance. As the corner of the dock started to sink and fill with water, hundreds of giant spiders emerged frantically, pouring out from between the boards, swarming over and around the feet of those of us who were still standing on dry ground. This dock was theirs apparently. We all immediately began to scream and jump into the water trying to get away. But the spiders were in the water too, and stuck to us as we swam. I vividly remember the feeling of them clinging to my wet hair, fleshy bodies and long squirming legs, hopelessly intertwined with my own strands. At some point I managed to swim a little further away. I got out of the water to take a breath when I felt something on the top of my head. I reluctantly reached my hand towards my head. I could feel the slimy hairs of a giant spider sitting on the top of my head. I grabbed the spider and threw it as far as I could, as I let out a loud scream. Adrenaline propelled us back to the main part of the swimming area, and by the time we got there, thankfully, we were spider-free. but this is a childhood trauma that lingers with me. I had not really been afraid of spiders before, but I would say this was a major turning point. The thought of us lying on a dock in the sun, completely oblivious to a horde of giant spiders that was lurking just inches beneath us, creeps me out to this day. This story took place when I was living in Florida. During my time there, I owned a nice house on the beach. This was amazing because every time I got a day off, I would be able to go down to the ocean and relax. That was up until a couple days ago, when everything changed. The day started off just like any other day. I had a day off from work, so I was planning to chill by the beach for most of the day. I should probably mention that I am a 23-year-old female, living alone. Normally, I like to set up my stuff on the beach in front of my house, so that it's easy to go in and out of the house in case I need anything. Anyways, I ended up going into the ocean to cool off. After that, I came back out and sat down to relax. That was when I caught a glimpse of my house. The light in my bedroom was on. I remember 100% that I turned off the light before leaving my house for the beach. Of course, now I was confused and curious, so I started walking back to the house to check it out. Once inside, I walked straight up to the bedroom and looked around. But as I thought, there was nobody there. I also made sure to briefly check the entire house before heading back out to the beach. For the rest of the day, everything seemed fine at the house. Once 6 p.m. hit, I decided to pack up all my stuff and leave for the day. As I turned around, I looked up at my bedroom window. The light was back on. Not only that, I could see the silhouette of a person standing in the window staring at me. As soon as the person realized that I saw him, he turned away and disappeared from view. This time, I was extremely concerned, but I did not call the police yet, since I thought I might be hallucinating. This is because it makes no sense that there would be a man in my house. I walked into the front door and screamed, "Is there anybody in my house?" There was no response, so I continued up the steps towards my bedroom. Once inside, I sat on the bed in shock, because there was no one in the house. I also decided to call the cops just in case. After I got off the phone, I realized the footprints of mud in my room. The prints looked like boot prints from a man. This concerned me, but what scared me the most is that the footprints led to the edge of my bed. That's when it hit me. I slowly looked under the bed, and what I saw scarred me. There was a man hiding under the bed in my bedroom. I screamed in horror and ran out of my room, running out of the house. Luckily, the guy did not follow me, and when the cops showed up, they were able to arrest him. I still don't know the guy's intentions for entering my house, but I'm just happy that I am safe. During the month of August, I had planned a small vacation with some of my friends. We were planning to fly to California for a week and chill by the beach and party. My plan was to fly at night and reach California by the next morning, and then get to the rented Airbnb. As soon as we landed in California with my friends, we drove down towards the beach and got to our Airbnb. Once I finished unpacking, I put on my bathing suit and I walked out onto the beach to go into the ocean. My friends obviously arrived in California as well, and they came down to the beach. After a long day at the beach, one of my friends decided that we should go out to the local bar to get some drinks. This sounded like a great idea, so I agreed. Later that night, we all dressed up nicely and walked a 10-minute walk to our local bar. Once we arrived, we all ordered a drink and tried talking to some girls to try and get their numbers. This took a long portion of the time at the bar. At some point, I was getting kinda tired, so I told my friends that I was gonna leave the bar. Surprisingly, my friends also decided to join me and leave the bar since it was late. By this time, it was already 2 a.m. The Airbnb was located 10 minutes away, so we decided to walk back. I was a little buzzed, but I knew I was definitely better than my friends. As my friends and I were walking back, I heard a loud car engine sound from my right. I turned to my right to make sure everything is okay, and that's when I noticed a fancy sports car approaching us. I knew this was not the best situation to be in, as I realized we were probably about to get jumped. So I told my friends to just start walking a little faster. This did not help, as the car sped up, pulled up next to us, and 3 men got out of the car. The main guy yelled at us to give them everything we got. This included money, watches, and phones. For some reason, I ended up yelling back at the 3 guys saying no. Looking back on this, it was a very stupid idea. The main guy then approached me face to face and repeated himself. Me being the stupid dumbass decided to punch the guy. Surprisingly, my punch did some damage as the guy fell to the ground. My friends then also started to fight the other two people. This quickly escalated into a street fight. Luckily, my friends and I all managed to somewhat beat up the three guys and escape. To this day, I am happy that we were able to escape that night without getting jumped. During the time that this story took place, I used to live in Virginia. Anyone who lives in Virginia knows that we don't have the best beaches, but we have something at least. At the time, I was 20 years old. My girlfriend, who was also 20, lived close to the beach. One Saturday night, I invited her to go out with me to the beach to chill, relax, and watch the stars. I told her that I was gonna bring food and a blanket to have a picnic on the beach. When she agreed to go, I told her that I would pick her up by 7 p.m. By this time, the sun was starting to set, and I started the 30-minute drive to her house. On the way to her house, when I was about 5 minutes away, I noticed a white Nissan car had been tailgating me for a while. I was not completely sure, they could have been going to the beach as well. Either way, I decided to test them out. I took 4 right turns, creating a circle to see if they would follow me. To my surprise, they did, without hesitation. At this point, I decided to call my girlfriend and let her know what was going on. I did not want to drive to her house, so I don't give away her address to the strange man following me. So what I decided to do was stop on the side of the road in order for the car to pass. I know there was no way he was going to stop because he was not going to risk a confrontation. I was right. The car kept on going, speeding up and driving away. Once I was sure the car had completely passed, I continued the drive to my girlfriend's house and picked her up. When we arrived at the beach, I parked the car and we both brought out all the food and items down to the sand. By this time, it was already dark since I arrived late due to the road situation. Anyways, we both ate and then looked at the stars and talked. I think we talked for at least 1 hour when my girlfriend stopped me and said, "Do you hear that?" I was so caught off guard that I replied with, "Wait, what?" She then began to tell me that she heard some sounds coming from the ocean, kinda like splashing sounds. I was confused. I heard those sounds as well, I just didn't think much of it. But then to make things worse, the whistling started. It was a strange whistle, a mix between a creepy but calm whistle. This pushed it over the edge. I stood up and looked towards the ocean. My eyes were already adjusted due to the darkness, so I was able to clearly see the man in the boat. He was looking right at us, not moving, and whistling. "Is there a problem?" I yelled. There was no response, just some more whistling, but the boat seemed to go away slowly. After it fully disappeared, I reassured my girlfriend that everything was fine, and we continued talking. Not even 10 minutes later, I heard the same sound coming from the ocean. This time, I quickly stood up and looked at the ocean. There was no boat. In fact, I could not see anything. I squinted my eyes and scanned the ocean again. This time I could see the head of a man poking out of the water. This was a horrifying sight. There was no way anybody would be out in the ocean at 9 p.m. in complete darkness. That's when I realized it had to be the same guy that was on the boat earlier. I was not going to stick around to find out. I told my girlfriend that we were leaving and I quickly packed up our stuff. We both left and drove to the nearest fast food place. Luckily, nothing else happened for the rest of the night. Now, looking back on the situation, the car tailgating me earlier was probably the same person that was stalking us on the beach.